So, hang about. Here we go.
Okay.
But so to the eagle-eyed among you, I'm not even going to try and kayfabe this or hide the fact that Jamie was worried about the fact that I could see there's some mats in the hair there's some mats in the corner now, and his hair might be slightly different, and I've completely changed clothes. So we're not going to hide the fact that there was a slight gap, but what I was thinking, we were going to have to come back at a later date and talk about Quills, but as it's worked out, we can talk about Quills now. So, Jamie, we're going to talk about Quills, the third film in your selection. So, one that I had completely passed me by, and one that I really wanted to discuss, because where it was getting quite close towards the end of a podcast, I was like, I really want to make sure we do this film a service, because it is an incredible piece of work. So, yeah, where would you like to start talking about it then?
Yeah, well, this is what happens when you have a guest who's got verbal diarrhea, which I think is an appropriate metaphor to use considering the content of this particular film.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, okay. So, first of all, how did I come to Quills? Well, this is actually of the three films, this was the one that I saw on the cinema. Okay. The other two made their way through onto TV through watching it on, satellite television back then, through Sky, and the first one had been in the zeitgeist and been, I was aware of, but I hadn't pursued, but then it just crept up on me on TV. The other one had been late night viewing and then caught half of it and then watched it. Quills, it was totally different to those two. As soon as I heard that this film was coming out, as soon as I heard this film was in production, for that matter, I wanted to see it. Mainly because the Marquis de Sade is a fascinating icon in the history of art, literature, politics, philosophy, and often for very wrong reasons. I mean, this is the guy that we get the word sadism from. So let's not beat around the bush about that. As an individual, we've got this thing about art from artists, which is interesting, because certain people might have their views on Tom Cruise outside in his religious influences and things like that outside of filmmaking. From all I've ever heard, the people I know who've worked with him say he's a great guy. Everyone's got their own rights to their own religion and so on. And I think Scientology is a discussion for another day. Obviously, we know about Kevin Spacey and his current situation, and where that features at the moment. Then then of course, obviously, we might have certain issues with certain actors and however they act, they conduct themselves outside. I think you mentioned it earlier on in our discussions. But when it comes to the Marquis de Sade, I don't think he'd ever be an individual that I'd ever like.
I think that's a fair enough statement.
Yeah, exactly. As a person I'd ever like. He never killed anybody, although his presence in so many true crime books, usually of the very, should we say, what's the word now? Pulp non-fiction variety. He's usually listed amongst serial killers and mass murderers and dictators, and he was a playwright, and a novelist. Possibly was a rapist. We don't know. We know that I think the crimes that he got, his worst crime was that he gave aphrodisiacs to prostitutes that they then believed would poison them, and he might have inflicted in a sort of what we now call BDSM sort of culture. There was something that went on there. But mainly, the main accusations put against him. And to be honest, I mean, when we come to talk about the truth of this particular film, which obviously is a completely fictionalized account of the Marquis de Sade, but it's it doesn't attempt to be or pretend to be a true story. I mean, this is not it's not what I would call an historical film. I'd call it. It falls more under the genre of period film or period drama. You probably say it. It's inspired by true events to a certain extent, as in it features people. It features fictionalized versions of people who were real. And the Marquis de Sade spent the last of his days in the Charenton Asylum. We know that much we know is true. There's certain elements of his life that are brought into the story, but for the most part, it's kind of told in a way that is what I would call a consumer-friendly version of a Sardian play or Sadian play. It's probably the closest way to describe it. Anyway, but he interested me just because of his cultural impact. We couldn't get away from it. I don't move away from the darker things that affect our society. In fact, a lot of time I feel it's my job as a self-protection teacher to know about these different things. But I've always been fascinated by it in literature, and I make no bones about that part. Sade's writing, I wouldn't recommend to anybody, although I think its significance is important. I know a lot of people in the art world hold him up in high esteem. There's a certain section of the art world do, and the fine art world do. I mean, you probably have more insight to that than me, Phil.
I agree. I think it's because it's challenging convention, and there's a whole nother subject about offence and causing offence, but also dealing with the fact that if you don't explore these areas, how do you ever hope to learn from them? And and this is the thing, he's getting tried with obscenity and stuff, but it's a subjective opinion of what is obscene, what is titillating. And you always got to be worried when people are doing stuff for your own good before you've had a chance to look at it yourself.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Absolutely. Which is obviously what Quills opens up all the discussion on, I think.
Yes. It was like I say, I couldn't believe I've never seen it, because it was such a right up my alley film.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And I think it's presented. If we, out of all the three films, you talked about moral ambiguity. This one, of the three, this is the most ambiguous. Yeah, this is the one that does not give you anything close to a comfortable answer at the end.
Do you know, there's one thing that I really wanted to mention to you as well before I forget, that all three films, the moral ambiguity, they're all dealing with an interrogation or a trial of some kind.
Yes.
But at the same time, as they're interrogating the characters, the audience themselves are being interrogated by, do you think this is right? Do you agree with this? Is this your morality? And that's why I found these three choices were so incredibly precise and interesting as well, the things you chose to talk about.
Yeah, I often, when I look at films, and obviously I here and there, I've tried to give recommendations to similar movies or films that I feel reflect a similar theme. Like I talked about Show Business with Swim with Sharks, All About Eve, Sunset Boulevard, etc. And I talked about A Few Good Men with the courtroom dramas, Witness to Prosecution. With Quills, there are several other films that have the moral ambiguity. But the only other film I can think that will challenge you in a totally different way, but challenge you in this way, challenge you in a totally different way, but still challenge you to the same degree, would be another film, this one from the 2000s, Doubt.
Oh, is that Meryl Streep, isn't it?
Hoffman and Meryl Streep.
Yeah, really good, really.
Yeah,
really
another
good.
play, I hasten to add. So there's definitely a theme that's going through all these. Two of these films are based on plays, and one of them was a film that was turned into an unsuccessful play. So we've got. So with Quills, again, I knew about it. Fascinated by Marquis de Sade. More interested in the character than I am in any of the works. The works are interesting only in the respect that, as you say, challenging. It's written. The debate a lot of the time with Sade is one of my favourite writers, my favourite short story writer, full stop, is Angela Carter, who was a fan of the Marquis de Sade, and she wrote a book called The Sardian Woman, which defends Sade as a proto-feminist, which is quite a shocking thing when you consider a lot of feminists are against Sade.
I would like to see where the reach for that was actually.
Absolutely, but Angela Carter is considered one of the great feminist writers of the 20th century, if not one of the greatest. So this is a serious, voice. And she wrote a whole non-fiction piece called The Sardian Woman, where again she pushes the argument that actually he empowers women by showing the horrors of what happens when women conform to what's considered to be the virtues of their time. Whereas he also actually does present strong women, because the book that you see at the beginning, the novel at the beginning that you talk about, is Justine, and its counterpart, its sequel, if you like, or its I don't know what the term is for something that happens at the same time. There's interquels, there's prequels, there's sequels, but it's a side by side sequel sort of thing. Think Saw 3 and Saw 4 if you want to go into that kind of from a movie perspective. But so he wrote Juliet, which is about Justine's sister. So Justine is this girl who lives this entirely virtuous life, but she is taken advantage of throughout that whole existence, and eventually she's struck by lightning. She's eventually killed and struck by lightning at the end of it. But she goes through all these things, terrible, obscene things are done to her. She's raped, she's taken advantage of, she's thrown into poverty, she's condemned by the church, and everyone. All she ever tries to do is do the right thing, try to be virtuous. Her sister Juliet, on the other hand, becomes a prostitute and completely embraces all the vices of her time, and takes advantage of people whenever the opportunity arises, and she prospers, and she actually rescues her sister at the end of Juliet, but then doesn't save her because nature, which is Sard's god, if you like, or goddess, strikes her down at the very, very end. So it kind of shows you, like, even when you're saved by your sister, nature doesn't like you anyway, because terrible things happen to good people. So he does that as well. But again, but a lot of his philosophy that Angela Carter seems to argue is that he is intentionally provoking the institutions of time, and we know that, and I agree with that. How far that goes into how he is as an individual, how much that goes in his philosophy is obviously, which comes across as very nihilistic. It's extremely hedonistic, of course, and a lot of the time he's also saying, this is what all the other aristocrats are doing, but the difference between them and me is that I'm being honest about it.
Yes.
And
so, accountable to
exactly. So there's a degree of arguing whether it's accountability. I'm not defending Sard. That's Angela Carter's place to do that. I'd say for the most part, I'd say as an individual, I could never like the guy. His work is hard work. Carter again argues that again's intentional. That repetition all the time is intentional. Geoffrey Rush's portrayal of him in Quills is brilliant.
I was absolutely blown away by that. Again, another film with the cast top to bottom, left to right. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, but this is Rush's movie. I mean, I like some of the supporting cast. I mean, I'm a Billy Whitelaw fan. I've always loved her in films, and she plays the mother. She plays Madeline's mother. The blind lady in there, and she's fabulous. I mean, again, I loved her in The Craze. I even loved her in The Flesh and the Fiends, where she puts on this really a sort of stereotypical Scottish accent, but she's great, and she's brilliant. She's really, really good as a supporting cast member in this film. Michael Caine. Not a lot of people like bad Michael Caine. Like we talked about how we've got Kiefer Sutherland gets his reprieve nowadays by being heroic.
Yeah, being a good guy. Yeah,
he's played lots of heels. Heel Michael Caine is sort of like a lot of people don't like that. We like Michael Caine to be our Cockney hero a lot of the time, but he does play a good villain, I have to say.
He really does, like everything restrained and drawn in. Yeah,
absolutely. Nobody attempts an accent as well. That's what I like about it. It's and everyone goes, look, I've seen, there's films like Shadow of the Vampire, for example, where they all put on German accents to give it's a slight, it's an artistic choice, should we say? Whereas Quills could have kind of gone that route, but I've got to give Kaufman, his due. He went no, and obviously Doug Wright for this. in the respect they went, no, let's just focus on the acting and not try to be, no one, there's no one in the main cast who's French, let's just bring out the essence of the characters. And in doing that, Geoffrey Rush seems to bring the Marquis de Sade to life, or at least the icon of the Marquis de Sade. I'm not sure if the Marquis de Sade was like this. I think he portrays him as a far more appealing character. His Marquis de Sade, or at least Doug Wright's as well, who's the guy who wrote the play and the screenplay, seems to be a slight meshing of very much Sade, obviously, but you've got sort of James Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester, who's like Sade's predecessor by 100 years, the libertine, if you like, the original libertine, the Earl of Rochester. And then you've sort of got Byron in there as well, I think, as well. I see both of those to a certain degree. Maybe you're not seeing Byron's dashiness, but certainly the dramatic and the flair for the drama that Brush brings to it. But to me, this could be a seminal performance. I mean, it's, the King's Speech, is often credited as a great thing, and Shine is obviously the thing that made everyone pay attention to Geoffrey Rush, and and everyone loves him as Barbossa. I mean, again, against Johnny Depp, he does a great job as this really appealing villain. I mean, he's fabulous in that. But as far as dramatic performances go, showing his range, Quills, he is the Marquis de Sade. When you see him, you can believe you're actually watching the Marquis de Sade.
It's funny you should mention about the Libertine as well, because that's the film with Johnny Depp in it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I didn't actually put two and two together till you just said it now, but there's really, that film really echoes a lot of Quills. There's really similarities.
Not just watch the double bill. Yeah, our monkey's in that, by the way. Our monkey's in that, by the way. Yeah, it's on Johnny Depp's shoulder. Oh, really? Yeah. So, but yes, but of course he is considered, because the Marquis de Sade is synonymous with the libertine movement, the whole libertine idea. But yet James Wilmot is, a century or so earlier, is like the original libertine, so to speak. He's the guy who, I remember, being, many years ago, finding out about the Earl of Rochester, funnily enough, through a book called it's one of Tom Holland's vampire books, Deliver Us from Evil, and it's set during the Restoration. So, which is the time when Charles II came back to power after Cromwell's death, and Cromwell's son couldn't manage taking over the country, and therefore they brought in the royal family again, and in came Charles II. And in Charles II's court, of course, we've got James Wilmot, and James Wilmot wrote poetry that was pornographic, and he swore and all the rest of it. And he's featured in this series of books that Tom Holland wrote, which I highly recommend. Really, really good fun. Like, one of them's about Lord Byron being a vampire. There's another one featuring the times of Jack the Ripper, and it's got the Lyceum, and Bram Stoker's in there and everything. It's really, and you get wonderful sequences, like Oscar Wilde gets to talk to Lord Byron. Two different ages of people. It's like that's like a dream meeting that you just love to hear those two talk to each other, and it's really, really done well. But anyway, yes, but he wrote a sort of a prequel to all of that, set during the Restoration, where he featured James Wilmot, and that's what drew my attention to James Wilmot. And I saw some of his poetry, and I saw the libertine thing, and yes, like you, I then drew that connection, going, James Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester, the Marquis de Sade, Lord Byron. There, and Byron's like at the very end of it. So if you imagine, Byron's like, that's why Byron is mad, bad, and dangerous to know. That's why he's the original rock star. If you look at everything, like so much like we think about vampires and all that sort of image, comes very much from Byron. Byron is at the very end of that, and why he was so notorious was because the Regency period was going to give way to what would eventually become the Victorian era, and lots of things were going out of fashion that were very popular then, like boxing, and people were, people started becoming more conservative about their sexuality. All that sort of stuff started happening during the Victorian era. So, Byron was like seemed a little bit out of time in that respect. Go to Sade, and of course he's like challenging everything there, and that's exactly what we're seeing with Quills. So I saw Quills in a cinema with hardly anybody else there. Okay, my future wife, said, "Should we go see a film?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "You know what? I really want to see this film Quills." don't know if you'd be up for it, but and I said, but it's a film that it's getting, not a lot of people like it. I was hearing it on, I remember Stu actually saying to me in the gym, and we were working out in the gym, and our mutual friend, pro wrestler, Stu Allen, he was saying to me, Quills isn't getting very good ratings and that, and I was going, oh, but I really want to see it. It sounds really, really good. And I didn't even know Jeffrey Rush was, so I didn't know about Shine or anything. So 2000, the wife went, I'll find it. So she found it, and we didn't get to see it in some Prince of Wales cinema or some, because again, the perfect setting for this would be a boutique cinema or something, or an old art house cinema or anything like that. That would work. It wasn't. It was a sort of multiplex, I suppose. But there was still a wonderful. In some ways, it was better because it wasn't trying to pretend to be anything else. It was a bit of a multiplex, and but there was nobody hardly there, so we almost had the cinema to ourselves.
Quite a lot of subversion of modern cinema, really. Yeah.
Yeah, if you like, and so we sat down and watched it there, and we came out and we loved it, and it's so good from start to finish. Again, like the other two films, not really acquainted with Philip Kaufman's work. I mean, he's known for his variety. He's known for having a real range of different films. But he's also known as an auteur, isn't he? So, but it's a film that doesn't feel overly stylized for a period drama. I mean, I've heard people who don't like period dramas really liking Quills, and saying it doesn't feel like it's, a big flowing Pride and Prejudice. Sort of thing. It doesn't, to categorize it, it's quite, it's not easy, is it?
No, and that's one of the things I really loved about it, and it really gelled with me, that it didn't give way to the usual tick boxes of what you get from period dramas, like the billowing bosom and the wistful looks. It seemed to be almost having fun with that. It was subverting expectations. This is one that I am sort of hastened to spoil, but the ending really did surprise me. If you haven't seen it, I really, really would recommend it. Don't be put off by the subject matter, because it deals with so much more than that. It's dealing with the nature of censorship and the freedom of speech and the will and want to be creative no matter what, and love, and against, and talks about religion and stuff. It covers so many subjects in such a precise and accurate running time. It truly is an amazing film.
Yeah, I mean, even though it talks about things that we consider to be atrocities, and obviously lots of taboo subjects, things like that, it's not a film that has itself never had a problem with the censorship. So this isn't a film that I feel like it doesn't what's the word, again it's actually not unlike Sard's works. It's actually not gratuitous.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. This is not. It's not overly sexualized, even though Sard's always talking about sex and death. It's not. It's got some brutal moments in it.
Yes.
But it's not full of all these brutal moments. Do you know what I mean? It's not that. It's not like
It's not like a torture porn, or nothing's done for the sake of it. Everything has a reason behind it, and that's what makes it. It's got. I sorry to interject for a second, but I always feel that I like to feel that you have a duty of care to an audience, or like you can get away with anything in art as long as you've considered what you're doing, and this seems like a very considered work. We mentioned Saw, some of the later Saw films. It just feels like, for me, let's just throw something up on screen that will gross people out. It didn't really matter. There was no consequences. You didn't know these characters. It was two meat sacks getting ripped apart just for people in the audience go, oh. Whereas this film, considering its subject matter, is completely the opposite. You really care about these characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't, although I would say it could be described as Gothic cinema. I'd say it's not pure Gothic cinema. I'd say it would be described as Gothic cinema because, Sard, again's a big influence on the Gothic movement, literature and art. And, just because of his iconic status, he's definitely part of that. But you could never describe it as a horror film. There are horrific things that are in it, but I'd never describe it as a horror film.
No, it's more. Again, it's more of a drama. It's more like it's very good because all three films again you've chose make very good moralistic points without hammering you over your head. Like I think we mentioned earlier on about being in cinema now or approaching certain art and there's almost a tick box, whereas this all these three films make their points succinctly without having to turn around at the audience and sort of wag their finger and go, now you understand what the point we're trying to make here. They give the audience credit of intelligence.
And I think Quills in this respect really, as I said, of the three, Quills is the one that is the most ambiguous. It is the one where you come out of it and it goes, and it's certainly, the most obvious subject it talks about. I mean, it talks obviously this hypocrisy demonstrated by everyone who's in the film, virtually everybody I can think of. I mean, Madeline is like our innocent, if you like, in this case, and obviously, I said that. I'm not sure if the Saab was guilty of rape or not. Well, technically speaking, yes, he was, because the real Madeline was 14 years old, and unlike the character in the film, who he flirts with all the time and tries to molest and all this sort of thing, she in real life, he really did have a relationship with her while she was 14 years old when she was working at the Sharonton Asylum. But she's portrayed as the innocent in the story, I suppose. But most of the characters are all portrayed as being hypocrites. Michael Caine's character is a hypocrite. Joaquin Phoenix's character proves to be a hypocrite. He goes against everything he believes in, and virtually morphs into Sard by the end. And worse than him, actually ends up doing the things that Sard talks about. He actually ends up doing. He ends up that's the irony of it. Obviously, Michael Caine comes in as this puritanical feature, again a fictionalized version of the character that he was, even though I believe the real life Roy Collard, he did used to use quite what we consider to be torture as a method for handling mental patients. I mean, there's certain things. I mean, things like the dunking and everything, and that stuff was going right up into the Victorian era. People used to think of that, but he didn't. But it wasn't to anything like to the extent that he does in that film, and he wouldn't have been supporting, Joaquin Phoenix's character when he goes to that extreme either. And also, it's interesting because it's got we see the presence of, at the very end, it's done in a sort of semi-humorous way as well, to the Bouchon character. The Bouchon is the sex offender in the story.
Yes.
The one that's the most likely vessel, if you like, for the crimes that Sard pushes, right? So because that's the argument, isn't it? The Bouchon character is the argument to such things. All well and good being really liberal with all your writing and feeling you've got no responsibility, and art is art and it's up to other people. But you get someone like Bouchon who gets subjected to it and sees it, and then it becomes dangerous. I mean, because this is the thing, Ian Brady had the works of the Marquis de Sade. This is just it. There are some absolutely reprehensible people. They're not all just innocuous artists who are just exploring the mental side. There are genuinely people who will. I mean, my argument all the time is that they'll commit those crimes anyway, but. But what some other people say, but this kind of stuff makes them more inventive, makes them think like that. But anyway, he gets put in a
interesting point.
He gets put in a supposed medieval torture device known as the Iron Maiden towards the end, and we get a semi-humorous part because you hear him going, "I'm sorry, I won't do it again." You hear his voice coming up out of it, which is quite weird because when you know what he's done, it's like So one moment, and then suddenly he suddenly becomes this little boy all of a sudden again. It's all like, and it's great how they do that, and the fact that Kaufman would keep that in, to say that it's reminding the audience again. This person has done a terrible, reprehensible crime to the most innocent person in the story. But actually, when it comes down to it, he himself is something of an innocent in his mind. Look at his mental state. He might do terrible things, but perhaps if he's not exposed to terrible, perhaps if he's got the right medication, got the right care, then he's not going to be a danger to other people. And essentially, he's as much a victim to his own impulses and that, and you hear him speaks like a little boy, like going, and funny enough, because the Iron Maiden is a completely fictitious a medieval device. It wasn't invented until the end of the Victorian era, so it's also anachronistic in this.
I just think as well, one of the biggest things that come across for me is it's the fear of censorship, and maybe this is just when the viewer takes what they want from a piece of art and it speaks to them in the way it needs to, but not being frightened to have conversations, yes. Understanding that offense may be caused, but being able to understand that offense and then still being able to reach a debate and an understanding of each other's position. And I found that's what I really got from this film, that you don't have to agree, you don't have to acquiesce or understand or believe any of these people, or say, okay, that's completely my way of looking at the world, but you do be able to have to debate and consider.
Yes, absolutely, and that's just it. It's about the discussion. It's about and that's what that film does not leave you with. It tells you, it shows you what censorship does. It shows you that you censor things, but these things go on anyway. Michael Caine's there, arrives as the great Puritan, and we find out that he's actually got a child bride that he's taken from, that he's had kept for him in a convent, the big institution of what moral standards are supposed to be, so she's there. Of course, it's a triangle, isn't it, that's going on here. We've got Geoffrey Rush as we've got the Abbé, with Joaquin, played by Joaquin Phoenix, and we've got Michael Caine as Rory Collard, and they don't let you off on any of them. All three of them, except for Caine, is the only one who we know is the heel, is the absolute heel.
Yeah, they give him they what he does to his child bride and stuff is enough that it's like, you're not gonna, there's nothing good about him. The way Caine plays it as well, there's no sympathy in this man. He's very withdrawn in and sure of what he does and takes pleasure in it, it seems sometimes as well.
And by representing that ends up allowing us to be more sympathetic to Sard, who's railing against it by saying, well, you're just a bunch of hypocrites. You're all doing this anyway, but you're telling everybody else not to. And it's only the privileged who are allowed to do it, and it's only the even though he's an aristocrat, so he's railing up against that, and you're stifling people to trying to control their minds, and you're not being honest about how people are as well. You're presenting this I'm the his voice is like, I'm the honest person, that's going on, and then you've got the Abbé who is being taken advantage of by Sard. So he's there trying to, and it's true, in the Charenton Asylum, he did believe, he was very forward thinking in allowing the patients to express themselves through art. He had a very moderate approach for the time. He wasn't like Joaquin Phoenix. I believe he was. He was. I think he was 4 foot something, and I think he might have even had a serious back issue as well that made him sort of hunched over as well. I think there was some. He had some serious deformities, as well. But Joaquin Phoenix plays him. Not one of Joaquin Phoenix's strongest roles, I hasten to add. Although this was coming right off Gladiator at the time, which won the Oscar. Can you believe it? It won all the Oscars, and this barely got a sniff.
That's something we spoke about earlier on, isn't it? It's about what films are worthy, and also what film. Sometimes it's about an agenda, isn't it? It's like what are we promoting at this time? So
yeah, but Geoffrey Rush's performance of the Marquis de Sade versus Russell Crowe playing Maximus. I mean, seriously. Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't do a good job, as Maximus, but Maximus is not a deeply complex character with, it's, it's a straightforward revenge thriller, I mean, it really is. I mean, I'm saying, Russell Crowe did everything he could with the part. I'm not taking that away. And in many ways, Joaquin Phoenix in that film had the more, he did the better job. He had a more complex character role. I thought he did a good job with it.
That's a whole other conversation about the heels become more interesting.
Definitely. So yeah. So let's stick to Quills. But saying Quills. I mean, I do like, some people have criticised Kate Winslet in this film, but I disagree. I think I think she's excellent. I've always liked Kate Winslet's work. Right up to the present day, her TV work, I think, is, she's really been shown as one of the best of her generation. She's definitely amongst that lot. She's good. It's just that Geoffrey Rush just eats up the scenery. Yeah. I think that's the thing. It all revolves around him and Sard. But the big so there's the censorship argument. Do we oppress this stuff? Should there be a limit on what people can say and can do? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But then the other end of the scale, you're going, if it goes unbridled, then what are the consequences of that now? Do we just do we have no responsibility as artists? Do we, and again, I just love it. It just leaves it as an open question because it shows you both sides of it. It shows you. But the other thing that comes through the whole film, again, don't want to spoil the end, but the big thing that my takeaway is ideas.
Yes.
The biggest takeaway from Quills, the censorship bit is the obvious part, but for me, the biggest element of this film is the indestructibility of ideas. And that is what you're looking at here, where you've got this war between Sard and the Abbe, which is all being, and the person who profits from it all, of course, is Michael Caine's character from start to finish. And that this, besides getting upset by the play, which again that's based on a real event actually, the play that goes that's attack on him. He pretty much is doing well out of this. 80% of the time he's winning pretty much, because he creates this conflict that wasn't there between Sard and the Abbe. Yeah. But then again, the argument could be, it wasn't there because the Abbe was being completely naive, and Sard was just like running right, allowing, the Abbe said, you're allowed to write your stuff, but you're not supposed to publish it. The whole idea it's supposed to be part of your therapy, and Sard's profiting from it and just having a great time, just taking advantage of the soft teacher and the soft authority figure, which then asks another question, doesn't it, about authority, about and parenting, if you like, the strict, the disciplinarian and the ultra liberal parent. But how do you balance it and all this sort of thing that's going on. And then above it all, the existence of ideas. So we begin with it being in printed form as a book, the full extent of how it should be as an art form, right down to you can't even say it, or even if the artist is no longer with us, the ideas will remain. And will go on and still there. Well, we're still talking about Sard today, aren't we?
Exactly.
I mean, despite all the the orders to burn all the copies of his works and that sort of thing. So so it's, to me, the positive message you can bring from Quills, if you like, is the idea about is ideas and how I'm going to say positive. That could be a neutral position as well, but that means, if you've got a good idea, if you've got an idea that's going to improve humanity, improve one another, they don't die either.
That's brilliant. That makes a lot of sense, mate. Well, listen, we've done it. three amazing films, and we didn't even need to talk about Jaws. No. that would definitely, I think, be a deep dive on that film and that film alone in the future. But I want to thank you once again for all your time. I probably will put this into two parts, so I'll say, if you could just again talk about your books a little bit and what's going on at the moment, and where people can find out more about you and stuff as well. But this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and all I'll say in closing is these three films, but especially Quills for me, are so, if you've not seen them, are so worth checking out, as actually watch them as a free as well, because the way they make you debate morality and censorship and everything we've discussed, they're a really good, really impressive choice and Edderite choice of free, mate. It's really good.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, okay. Everyone can find me on clubchimera.com. That's the main hub. On all the usual social media sites anyway, as business pages and as an individual. So you'll find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and I've also got my own podcast as well, of course. But the main hub for all of that is the clubchimera.com website. I've got 3 books out at the moment: Mordred's Victory, Other Martial Mutterings, Wrong Fu, and
this one,
latest one, and then we have
this is one, right?
Yeah, this one, yeah. Okay, so when
your parents aren't around, yeah,
that's right. Young Person's Guide to Self-Protection. Yeah. So that's and that's going to be available as an audiobook soon. It's available as an ebook. It's available as a printed book, obviously, but it's also going to be available as an audiobook.
Amazing. Well, mate, thank you so much. I'll get you back on in the future so we can start talking about the world's first summer blockbuster. But until then, mate, have a good one, and I'll speak to you later on. All right.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Take care, mate. Bye now.
Bye.